9 people walked out of their tent in the middle of the night, barefoot. No boots, no adequate clothing, into minus 40 degrees. And the footprints they left in the snow showed they were walking at a normal pace, not running, not stumbling, walking calmly, away from their tent, into the cold that would kill them. Whatever was inside that tent was more terrifying than minus 40 degrees. The Soviet government's official investigation lasted 3 months. Their conclusion: a compelling natural force. Then they sealed the files, barred entry to the area for 3 years, and sent a representative from the Central Committee of the Communist Party to personally ensure the investigation was closed. This is what governments do when something happened that they cannot allow to be explained. 9 people. Dead Mountain. February 1st, 1959. This is what actually happened. And this is what the Soviet state spent 67 years making sure you would never know. Before we talk about what happened, you need to know who they were. Because this is the most important thing. Not the theories, not the government files. The people. 9 real people who went into the mountains and did not come back. Igor Dyatlov was 23, a radio engineering student, experienced, calm under pressure. He wrote about his friends with warmth. The pass they died on was named after him. Zinaida Kolmogorova was 22. She wrote about being tired in the good way. The way you are tired when you are doing exactly what you want to be doing. Lyudmila Dubinina was 20, fiercely determined. A hunter accidentally shot her in the leg in 1957. She continued with the group. That tells you most of what you need to know about Lyudmila Dubinina. Yuri Krivonishenko was 23, a nuclear engineer. He had worked at the Mayak nuclear facility. He was present during the cleanup of the 1957 Kishtim disaster, a nuclear accident comparable to Chernobyl that the Soviet government covered up completely. He played mandolin. He wrote poems for his friends. He tried to resign from Mayak in 1958. His resignation was refused. He went on the expedition instead. He and Semyon Zolotaryov were both buried in a separate, prestigious, closed cemetery from the other hikers. No official explanation was ever given. Rostem Slobodin, 23, the most athletic, by far. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, 23, French ancestry. His father had served time in a gulag under Stalin. He had a reputation for making people laugh at exactly the right moment. Alexander Kolovatov, 24, nuclear physics. Before the Ural Polytechnical Institute. He had worked at an unnamed atomic institute in Moscow, officially only P.O. Box 3394. Yuri Doroshenko, 21. The kind of person every group needs and rarely appreciates until he is gone. And Semyon Zolotaryov, age 37. He was not supposed to be there. 13 years older than most of the group, a war veteran among students. Nobody knew him well. He joined at the last minute, without explanation. He asked the group to call him Sasha, a nickname for Alexander. His name was Semyon. Nobody asked why. And one more. Yuri Yudin, 21, chronic rheumatism, a congenital heart defect. On January 28th, his knee became too painful to continue. He turned back. He was the only one who did. He was the only one who lived. He kept a small, fluffy teddy bear for the rest of his life. A gift from Lyudmila Dubinina, given to him on the day he left. Semyon Zolotaryov, one of the 9 people on this mountain. was almost certainly not who he said he was. By the time the search party found him in May 1959, he still had a camera around his neck that nobody knew he had, a pen in one hand and a blank notebook in the other. We will come back to him. Before we talk about the night everything broke, there is one decision Igor Dyatlov made on the afternoon of February 1st that nobody who knew him has ever been able to explain. He chose to camp on an exposed slope in minus 40 degrees when adequate shelter was 1.5 kilometers below him. He was too experienced to make that mistake by accident. So either it was not a mistake, or something happened on that slope that made the decision for him. The group set out from Sverdlovsk on January 23, 1959, a 300-kilometer ski trek, destination Mount Otterton. On January 31st, they cached their surplus supplies in the valley below. They expected to be back within 2 weeks. On February 1st, they began the ascent. The weather turned. Heavy snow, dropping visibility. They veered off course in the whiteout and found themselves moving toward the slope of Kholat Shakal. Kholat Shakal, in the language of the Mansi people, who have lived in these mountains for centuries. The name means dead mountain. When they realized their mistake, they had two options. Move 1.5 kilometers downhill to the forested valley, shelter from the wind, or camp where they were, on the exposed slope, in minus 40. They chose to camp where they were. Yuri Yudin speculated that Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude. Nobody knows for certain. Nobody alive knows what Igor Dyatlov was thinking when he made that decision. Igor Dyatlov's final diary entry was written that evening. It is hard to imagine such comfort. Somewhere on the edge with a piercing wind, hundreds of kilometers from human settlements. He was content. He was exactly where he had planned to be. And he was the last person in the group to write anything. The group was due to send a telegram not later than February 12th. February 12th came and went, no telegram. This was not immediately alarming. Delays on winter expeditions were common. By February 20th, the families were pushing for action. Students and teachers. Then, the army and police, planes and helicopters. On February 26th, a search party reached the slope of Kholat Shakal. Student searcher Mikhail Sharavin spotted the tent from a distance. He said later that something looked wrong before he could identify what it was. The tent was damaged, not by wind, not by an animal. It had been cut open from the inside. Multiple cuts, confirmed by forensic analysis, definitively made from inside the tent. Inside, 9 pairs of boots, left behind, all of them. Food prepared, not touched. A flask of vodka, untouched. A flashlight on the snow outside, still on. The temperature outside was minus 40 degrees. 9 people abandoned a tent in minus 40 degrees. Without their boots, without adequate clothing, and did not come back. The footprints were still visible in the snow. All 9 sets, moving in the same direction. All consistent with people walking at a normal pace. Not running, not stumbling, walking. Away from the tent. In minus 40 degrees. Without boots. For people to walk, not run, out of their tent barefoot in minus 40. Something had to make the tent feel more dangerous than the cold. The first 2 bodies were found February 26th. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, at the base of a cedar tree, 1.5 kilometers from the tent. Both had stripped to their underwear. This is a documented medical phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. As hypothermia sets, and blood vessels dilate, the victim feels warm. This is not mysterious. This is what freezing to death looks like. Krivonischenko had third-degree burns from trying to maintain the fire. He had bitten off a piece of his own knuckle, documented in the autopsy, either to stay conscious or to stifle a cry. 3 more bodies found in the days following. Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin. At intervals between the cedar and the tent, moving uphill, back toward the tent. Dyatlov was found clutching a birch branch. His arm reaching toward the tent he could no longer reach. Kolmogorova had crawled further than anyone else. She died just short of the tent. The final 4 were not found until May 4th, in a ravine 75 meters from the cedar, under 4 to 6 meters of snow, in a makeshift shelter they had built themselves. Not panic, methodical, purposeful. These were people who understood they were in a survival situation and responded accordingly. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, major skull fracture, died of head trauma. Alexander Kolovatov, minor injuries, found with his arm around Lyudmila Dubinina. Semyon Zolotaryov, multiple rib fractures, missing both eyes. Force comparable to a car crash, no external wounds. Lyudmila Dubinina, multiple rib fractures, missing tongue, missing eyes, missing facial tissue. Force comparable to a car crash, no external wounds. Forensic pathologist Boris Vozrojdeny, internal damage without external evidence. He had never seen injuries of this type before. Lev Ivanov wrote in his official report, "The cause of death of all hikers was hypothermia. However, the brutal injuries of several victims cannot be explained by natural forces." He closed the case. The same day. The official investigation lasted 3 months. The hikers died due to a compelling natural force. 6 words, no explanation, no details, no reasoning. And then the files were sealed. The criminal investigation closed. Files sent to a secret archive. The pass barred from entry for 3 years. Governments do not seal the files of hiking accidents. They do not send deputy prosecutors from the Central Committee to personally close a regional investigation about 9 hikers. But that is what happened. Evgeny Okashev, Lev Ivanov's boss, confirmed in a 2015 interview. He was arranging another trip to the pass to fully investigate the last 4 bodies when Deputy Prosecutor General Ivan Urakov arrived from Moscow. Urakov had been sent on behalf of the Central Committee of the Communist Party and the Council of Ministers of the Russian Federation. This is not a local official closing a local case. This is Moscow closing a regional case about 9 hikers. Okashev also confirmed. The head of the Sverdlovsk prosecutor's office was present at the first postmortems for 3 days. In decades of legal work, the only time Okashev had ever seen that happen. The lead investigator received direct orders to dismiss all evidence of the flying spheres. The Mansi hunters who had drawn pictures of the orange lights had their drawings destroyed. Yuri Yudin confirmed he had seen those drawings before they were removed from the case file. When the Soviet archives opened in the 1990s, parts of the Dyatlov files were missing. The negatives from Krivonischenko's camera had been kept in the private home archive of Lev Ivanov himself. That is not an oversight. It is a choice. What Lev Ivanov wrote in 1990, 30 years after he closed the case, has never been fully addressed by any official investigation. It came from the man who ran the investigation himself. In 1990, Lev Ivanov published an article. I suspected at the time, and am almost sure now, that these bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death. This is the lead investigator, the man who ran the investigation in 1959 and closed it with no conclusion. 30 years later, saying he had believed the spheres were connected, but had been ordered to say otherwise. He also wrote that his team received direct orders to dismiss the flying sphere evidence completely. The lead investigator saw the spheres. His team saw the spheres. Independent witnesses from multiple locations saw the spheres. And the order from Moscow was, this did not happen. Mansi hunters camping near the mountains. Geologists 70 kilometers away who saw glowing, pulsating orbs flying in the direction of Kholat Syakhl. Members of the rescue party in March 1959. Local soldiers who reported the lights to a newspaper. The Tagil worker published the article. What were they? The 2,025 research points to a failed Soviet military rocket test. A failed test would produce exactly the visual phenomenon, described by every independent witness. Glowing, orange, moving, silent, wrong. If the lights were a failed military test, then acknowledging that a Soviet military test killed 9 Soviet citizens was a catastrophic admission the Soviet state of 1959 would not make. The simplest cover-up requires the least invention. Compelling natural force requires almost no invention at all. There is a theory that explains some of what happened on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, published in a peer-reviewed journal by researchers from 2 of the most respected scientific institutions in Europe, adopted by the Russian government as the official position in 2020. It explains why the hikers left the tent. It explains the crushing injuries. It explains why no avalanche debris was found. And it does not explain the footprints. It does not explain the government response. It does not explain Zolotaryov, or the lights, or the sealed files, or the investigator who said 30 years later he was ordered to suppress evidence. Here is what the science says, and here is exactly where it ends. In 2021, a team from University of ETH Zurich and EPFL published a research paper in Communications, Earth and Environment. They built a simulation of the specific slope, the specific tent position, the specific conditions of that night. Their conclusion: a slab avalanche could explain the crushing rib fractures without external wounds. This is genuine science, peer-reviewed, serious. It deserves serious engagement. What it explains: the crushing injuries, the reason the group left the tent urgently. What it does not explain: the footprints. Jim McElwain, geohazards expert, Durham University. For people to do that, they must have been terrified by something. An avalanche does not produce 9 sets of footprints at a normal walking pace. An avalanche causes panic, running, stumbling. Not 9 people walking calmly away from a tent without their boots. The slab avalanche does not explain the radioactive contamination, the separate prestigious burials, the Moscow intervention, the investigator's admission. Plausible, possibly partially correct, but incomplete. I don't know what else it could be. Is not the same as proof. Now coming back to the man. The man with the camera nobody knew he had. The pen, the blank notebook. Semyon Zolotaryov, age 37. A man whose biography did not hold together when examined closely. Let me tell you what the evidence actually shows. Official birth date, February 2nd, 1921. Church calendar, March 1st, 1921. A discrepancy in his own birth date. His confirmed service medals. Medal for the defense of Stalingrad. Medal for the capture of Königsberg. Medal for victory over Germany. But on his Communist Party application in 1949, he claimed the Order of the Red Star and the Medal for Courage. These were lies, documented lies, on an official party document. In a Soviet state where this carried severe consequences, he lied anyway, and nobody pursued it. He had tattoos hidden under his clothing. None of the other hikers knew about them. Among them, a 5-pointed star, the name Gina, his birth year, and a word, Darmuzawaya. That word has never been translated into any known language. When his body was recovered in May 1959, he still had a camera around his neck. A camera nobody knew he had. Yuri Yudin confirmed it was a complete surprise. A pen in one hand, a notebook in the other. The notebook was blank. He had written nothing. A man found dead with a camera around his neck. A pen in one hand and a blank notebook in the other. Was either preparing to document something or had just finished not being able to. When his relatives tried to put a monument on his grave, they discovered something extraordinary. Semyon Zolotaryov did not appear in the official burial records. The grave existed. The monument existed. But according to the documentation, Semyon Zolotaryov had never been buried there. In 2018, the grave was opened. First DNA test. Blood relationship on the maternal line excluded. The person in the grave was not Semyon Zolotaryov. Second DNA test showed a match with the niece, but the expert added a critical qualification. The result could not exclude Zolotaryov's brother, Nikolai, who had worked with the Germans during the war and disappeared without a trace. 2 DNA tests had 2 different conclusions. Neither confirmed, neither excluded. The question remains genuinely open. Who is buried under Semyon Zolotaryov's name? And where is Semyon Zolotaryov? What the evidence supports. Zolotaryov was almost certainly not who he presented himself to be. His biography was inconsistent. His party documents contained documented lies. His camera was unknown. His burial was prestigious, with no explanation. The person in his grave may or may not be him. What the evidence does not confirm: that he was a KGB agent, that the group was on a spy mission, that a foreign intelligence service was involved. These theories exist. Some researchers support them seriously. But they require evidence beyond what currently exists. Here, we present what the evidence show, not the evidence that would be convenient. Let us return to the orange lights, because they are the element of this case that every official explanation has quietly set aside. On the night of February 1st to 2nd, 1959, multiple independent witnesses from different locations reported glowing orange orbs in the sky over the northern Urals. Every single account dismissed or suppressed by the official investigation. And then the lead investigator spent the rest of his life believing they were connected to the deaths, and said so in print in 1990. The 2025 research, a failed Soviet military rocket test. A failed test would produce exactly what every witness described. Glowing, orange, moving, silent, wrong. acknowledging that a Soviet military test killed 9 Soviet citizens, was a catastrophic admission the Soviet state of 1959 would not make. The simplest cover-up requires the least invention. Compelling natural force requires almost no invention at all. Yuri Yudin lived for 54 years after January 28, 1959. He was flown in to identify the personal belongings of the group. He broke down when he saw their things. He worked with the Dyatlov Foundation for decades. He never married. He kept Lyudmila's teddy bear for the rest of his life. In his final years, he locked himself in his apartment. He told the friends he was writing a novel about the Dyatlov Pass. When his body was found after he died, there was no manuscript. Newspaper clippings, decades of them. Attempts to understand, a lifetime of not being able to. He died on April 27, 2013. He was 75 years old. His ashes buried at Mikhailovskoye Cemetery, next to the remains of his friends. The boy who turned back because his knee hurt, buried beside the 8 who did not turn back. After 54 years, finally back with them. If I had a chance to ask God just one question, it would be, what really happened to my friends that night? He also said something else, less quoted, more honest. Sometimes it's better not to know. 54 years of not knowing, and he still was not sure. That knowing would have been better. Every year, people go to Dyatlov Pass. Not researchers, not investigators, hikers. People who follow the same route, who stand at the memorial plaque with the 9 names on it. The mountain unchanged, the question unanswered. The Dyatlov Foundation, active expeditions in 2024-2025. A dendrochronology report completed in 2025. The search continues. The Russian government's official position, slab avalanche since 2020, unchanged. The slab avalanche explains some things. It does not explain the footprints. It does not explain the government response. It does not explain the sealed files. It does not explain the investigator's admission. It does not explain Zolotaryov. It does not explain the orange lights on the night 9 people died. The gap between the official position and the documented evidence has never been closed. And that gap in 2026 is the same gap it was in 1959. 9 people went into the mountains. None of them came back. The Soviet government sealed the files. The lead investigator said he was ordered to suppress evidence. The man who should not have been on that mountain is buried in a grave that may not be his. The lights that multiple witnesses saw were dismissed and destroyed. And 67 years later, the official explanation is still 6 words. A compelling natural force. That phrase has never been enough. It was not enough in 1959. It was not enough when Ivanov admitted in 1990 that he had been ordered to produce exactly that conclusion. It is not enough in 2026. 9 people. Dead mountain. February 1st, 1959. The question is not what killed them. The question is what they saw on that slope, in that darkness, that required the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union to personally ensure the investigation was closed. Someone in Moscow knew the answer in 1959. They may be the only ones who ever did. If this case deserves to be heard, share this video. Dark Matter. Stories. New episodes every week, where reality gets darker.